Welcome to our live Dat Chat podcast here at NOLA.com. Larry Holder, Jeff Duncan here with you once again live after Jeff's going to blame me. I'm going to blame Jeff. We could both blame our equipment, but regardless, the past 2 weeks we had to tape a podcast, which that's a normal podcast. We like to still be live. We could have just reverted back to being a just plain old normal podcast, but we're back live and glad to be with you guys. And Jeff, again, it is your fault.
I think the sun was in our eyes. I'm sticking with that. I still don't know. We still don't know exactly what happened to our audio equipment, but we will endeavor to get it fixed for next week for sure. So the audio itself might not be perfect this week. You might notice it's not quite as crystal clear, but you didn't come to hear great audio sound. You came to hear the great insight from Larry and I. And you'll get that again this week live as opposed to recorded.
Hopefully, yeah, they can hear that not muffled. I think we'll be fine. But already got a bunch of good questions. Again, you know the drill by now. Jump on our NOLA.com comment stream, ask some questions, and we will answer them there. Jeff will monitor the Mixler message board, who was questioning where the heck we were the last couple of weeks, which we are back, and we'll answer those questions as well. And let's just kind of lay out the landscape of where the Saints are right now. Jeff, it's the time of the year where you're seeing a lot of moves in the transaction wire. We just left rookie minicamp, which the Saints and every NFL team, when they hold those, they typically sign a couple of guys, whether it's a rookie, whether it's a veteran like Khalif Barnes, who's back, who spent some time with the Saints. He's back, re-signed. So you'll see some comings and goings before they get going into OTAs, which is next week. And then you got 3 weeks of OTAs, and then you got another week of minicamp sessions. So we're going to be getting some on-field action, which I think people are even more intrigued now that we've seen all this crazy comings and goings of big-name players with the Saints. And now we get to see where they start fitting within this year's team.
Yeah, you know what? All the years we've covered the teams, it's always fun to go to that first off-season practice, whether it's OTA or minicamp, and just see where people are lining up, because lots of times the coaches will implement these kind of position changes, and it takes a little while to get your bearings. You know, you go out there with your roster and you start trying to figure out who's at what spot. And I think we had a story last week from I think it was Herbie or Josh on our staff about the linebackers with Coach Mike Nolan. And that position group's going to be wide open. It sounds like they're going to be trying guys at a lot of different positions. So that's going to be a great focal point, I think, of this offseason to see who, first of all, tops the depth chart initially and who's going to be working at what position. And I think we're going to see that a little bit at some other spots as well, maybe at safety because they have so many different safeties. And along the offensive line, I'm sure they're going to be trying some guys at different spots because they've got some depth concerns there, at least early on.
Let's go right into the questions because there are I'm actually at the top of the NOLA.com comment section because they're all linebacker related. I'll just throw them all out there. Timbo64 saying, isn't this the third linebacker out of Florida we've drafted recently? 0 for 2 so far. Hope that third time is the charm where Anzalone. Do Peyton and Loomis have some kind of history with Gator defensive coordinators and linebacker coaches? I don't think they necessarily have a history, but you're talking about Ronald Powell, who...
That's the one I remember.
That's the one I remember. I'm not sure if I can remember the other one, but Ronald Powell, if you remember, he was basically Leonard Fournette in high school. He was Jadeveon Clowney. He was the number one recruit coming out, and he certainly didn't pan out that way. And I still think he's actually in the league. I think last year he was with Seattle. And was on their team when they went to the playoffs. Now he was inactive, but he stuck with the team. But yeah, I don't know if they remember another Florida linebacker. I think maybe you're just thinking of Powell. So, but anyway, Anzalone's someone that's going to be in there. Let's just go to Z-Dub over under at 5 games missed by Ellerbe this season, and then I'll just go to ATL blew a 28-3 lead. I'm sure Saints fans like that username. Just keep everyone in their natural position is all, and let Nolan take care of the coaching. No more projects, and they spell out a depth chart, which I don't know if I'm necessarily going to agree with your depth chart you've got there because you have Stephon Anthony as a middle linebacker as the leading middle linebacker.
No chance. There's no chance. lose credibility right away listing Anthony. I mean, the reason they're bringing in all these other linebackers is because they don't have confidence in Stephon Anthony. I'm guessing that it's probably going to be Robertson early on just because he was the guy calling the plays last year at the end of the season. And they like to go with the incumbent until somebody beats them out. And then I would also think that Monte Te'o is going to get a look there because that's what he did in San Diego. He has experience around the league. And even A.J. Klein, who's also been a guy that's been around the block and who they value for, I think, his intelligence and his ability to decipher defenses.
Now, exactly. I've said it. Have not changed my tone and about Stephon Anthony throughout the offseason. And why would I change it? It only validates the tone we've had about him where they've brought in 3 new linebackers. What does that tell you? That they're not satisfied with what they had at the position last year. And Mike Nolan did speak about Stephon Anthony. Of course, he's always going to be asked about because he's that first-round pick that came in the Jimmy Graham trade, and the intrigue is obvious why you'd ask about him. But he didn't say anything discouraging. I think he wants to see for himself on the field what he can do, what he can process. But you look at the guys they brought in, just on paper, A.J. Klein, who has more experience and did a solid job filling in for Luke Kuechly, running a defense. Mm-hmm. Manti Te'o, off injured and yet ran Mike Nolan's defense, ran the Chargers defense under Mike Nolan in San Diego. So who's he going to trust most right now putting in that spot, and who would Dennis Allen trust most putting in that spot? It would either be, like you said, Robertson, probably throwing in Klein, and probably throwing in Te'o, and seeing where everything kind of stacks up.
Yeah, and I think that position is going to go all the way deep into training camp before it really settles out, the dust settles. There's too much competition there, too many guys similar in experience and similar in pedigree. I don't think that thing's going to get solved for a while. I think it's going to be fun to watch, though. We really haven't seen it quite this competitive at that position in a while. A lot of new faces. And I think this Anzalone guy is a really interesting prospect. The more I read about him, the more I researched. He was a big-time recruit coming out of Pennsylvania. Actually had a weird recruitment. He committed to Ohio State on his initial visit, and then he got caught up in some kind of weird story about taking photos, social media photos with some child predator or something.
What?
And it wasn't him. They were just prospects. He and all the visitors that weekend, there was this big Ohio State booster who ended up being a child predator who was somehow got on the sidelines at the spring game, and it freaked out all these prospects. And
so they all
decommitted.
Oh.
Anzalone's father is a doctor in Pennsylvania, and he's calling the shots on the recruitment and said, I don't want my son going to a school where they don't have any kind of restrictions on who's on the sidelines. So they pull out. He commits to Notre Dame a couple weeks later, committed to Notre Dame the whole time. And then the day before he's supposed to report to Notre Dame for the all season, he pulls his commitment from them and goes to Florida, which is where his father went to school. So really weird recruitment, but a big-time prospect who could have gone anywhere in the country. And then the more you look at his background at Florida, I mean, he beat out Jared Davis early on for a starting spot, and Jared Davis was a first-round draft pick, of course, this past year. So he's got the ability. The question, of course, is can he stay healthy? I mean, Saints fans don't want to hear that because it seems like everybody on their linebacker core has some kind of injury concern. But if he can stay healthy, he looks like a guy that could be a nice find in the middle rounds.
So you're saying maybe I gave him too much grief in my initial judgment?
No, I don't. I agreed 100% with what you were saying.
Right.
But he's a guy I could see why they drafted him. You know, he's a guy that has upside. And let's face it, Peyton and Loomis they love doing this kind of thing. They love taking chances on guys, and lots of times they strike out. But sometimes it pays off. I mean, we talked about it last week. I was totally skeptical of Nick Fairley, who was kind of a roll of the dice, and it paid off for him. But there's been other times where it obviously it's not.
It paid off for Nick, too.
Right.
Obviously. Yeah, it paid off for
Big
both
time.
sides, yeah. And I know it's probably way down the deck, but one of the questions going forward with Fairley, okay, is he going to revert back to his old ways, put on weight, be less motivated because he got paid? I think that remains to be seen, but I guess the Saints, I don't question what they did. They didn't overpay for him. They paid market value for Fairley. I mean, I'm kind of going off on a tangent on Fairley, but I think they did well here. But let's go to Z-Dub, who says over-under at 5 games missed by Donnell Ellerbe this season. If you look at all these names, as of right this second, Donnell Ellerbe, to me, is the best linebacker. Healthy, he's the best one they've got. They can't bank on him, though. That's obvious. And so that's why they've got all this competition there. But if Ellerbe is healthy, there's no reason why you wouldn't start him week 1 at weak side linebacker.
And I think this might be the last year of his deal, right?
Last year of his contract.
So
right.
you've got that working for you if you're the Saints. I mean, he's going to be motivated to stay on the field and to produce, much the way Fairley was motivated last year, and it paid off for him. And this is kind of a make or break year. There's no question for Ellerbe, not only with the Saints, but maybe league-wide.
Absolutely. I agree.
You can't go 2 or 3 years and not be productive. And he wasn't productive his last year in Miami either. So he's got to produce this year or won't be in the league probably. So I think that works in the Saints' favor. I just don't know if he can stay healthy. I really don't. I don't know if a lot of these guys have similar kind of red flags. Te'o had some injury issues.
Last couple of years in Te'o, he had injuries. Look, he's coming off an Achilles injury.
Right.
Is he even going to be ready to go? I would assume so, but you don't know. I mean, a lot of the questions going into OTAs are about guys coming back off of injuries. I mean, we'll probably go into more of that in a little bit, but yeah, to me, it's a big question mark at linebacker injury-wise, and I'm never going to forget this because it just even shows you how deep the frustration goes with Ellerbe. Everybody knows he's a good player, but Peyton brought up how his son Connor asks him weekly about the inactive list, and he cringes to tell Connor when Donnell Ellerbe is inactive because Connor gives him grief about it, saying, when is this guy going to play? So even the kids, they even know Ellerbe's, fragile state as far as his health.
Connor's no different than all Saints fans, right?
Exactly.
Because how many times do we hear it? You see it in our Twitter timeline or in our email inbox. Look, it's amazing to me. As long as we've covered the league, you and I both, it always amazes me. Certain guys are always hurt, and then there's guys like Cam Jordan that are never hurt.
Or play through injuries and we don't know about them.
They're there every week, and you take them for granted. Zach Striefs of the world, I mean, they're just there. They keep coming, and you know they're not 100%. And I think it just says a lot about those kind of players compared to the guys. And I'm not saying these other guys aren't hurt, but it's just amazing. Either they're unlucky or they don't know how to play through it, or their bodies won't withstand the violence that is the NFL.
I'd throw Jari Evans in there too. He played for a couple of years.
He was an
Iron Man, and when he finally got healthy, he actually played well last year. And now, let's be honest, he might be in a better situation up in Green Bay. So good for him for kind of persevering. But yeah, you're right. There are those guys who are always injured. Heck, we could look at the guy that they cut last year. C.J. Spiller always had some nicked up things, and he had all this potential, but he can't stay on the field. And that kind of led to his undoing with the Saints and a few other teams after that.
Yeah, and then there's certain guys that are out there every week, and you really tend to take them for granted. But I also think there's certain positions that lend themselves to collisions, and linebacker's one of them, just like running back. And I really worry about guys that are banged up and have injury histories at that position because I don't know how you avoid it.
Well, that's why you were never a huge Reuben Foster guy.
Right.
During the draft process.
And look at that now. I mean, he's not even going to – is it a redshirt year is what we're talking about?
I don't think we know. It's like one day you hear one story, the next you hear the next. And it's also just like, for example, Sean Payton was asked about Max Unger going into the offseason and right after rookie minicamp and said he'd be ready by week 3 of the preseason. Boy, that seems really specific. In an attempt to try to debunk that he might miss 5 months. And, of course, he tried to discard that. And he tries to discard a lot of what Ian Rappaport from NFL Network reports.
Don't you think that no one really knows? I think that's one of those things where they're just debunking it just because it's Ian. But the truth's probably somewhere in between those two extremes. And I think it's a fluid situation. That's one of those tricky injuries, man. Liz Frank.
Absolutely, yeah.
Boy, that you don't want to hear that term if you're a football fan, because that's a really finicky spot for a big man. And we've seen guys not come back from it. So hopefully Unger does, because he's a critical part of that line for them.
Well, I think, what was it, last week when we did our podcast, there was a report that came out through Pro Football Talk about, Max Unger should be ready here sometime in the preseason, and that was an attempt to deflate it. And then Sean Payton saying on the record, look, I'm not going to say Sean Payton was Mike Florio's source, but hey, read between the lines. But yeah, Payton,
pretty sure.
Yeah, exactly. But Payton coming forward and saying it's to calm people's nerves. But I think you're right. I know you're right. They don't know when he's coming back. And it could be, if it heals quickly, he might be ready week 2 of training camp. If it doesn't and it lingers, it could linger. But Liz Franks are one of the more trickier injuries to deal with. It's not a broken bone. It's not even, say, a concussion when you get cleared. I mean, it's a tricky injury, no matter what your size, but specifically for a big man who's always kind of leaning and moving and like quick pushing. Yeah, exactly. So it's a tricky injury.
The one thing I would say that you can take a little solace in is it's Max Unger, who knows the offense up and down, is experienced. He really doesn't need training camp except to physically get in shape. As far as like needing to get in there against the Buffalo Bills or whoever they're playing week 3, he doesn't need any of that. And it's been proven over the years that these guys can step right in week 1 of the regular season without having camp and excel, especially a guy like Max Unger. So that's one thing I think that does work in their favor. If he doesn't play in preseason, I wouldn't panic at all, as long as it looks like he's going to be able to play for the regular season.
If I'm the Saints, I don't panic. I don't push it.
I wouldn't either.
Max will tell you when he's ready.
Right.
He's not someone he's a smart, sharp player. He's going to tell you when he's ready. And like you said, he can come in. And to me, it doesn't affect, with Larry Warford, it doesn't affect that to me. Warford's a veteran. He's played in a bunch of years, 4 years, so he knows how offensive line works. As long as he knows what he's doing, doesn't matter who's at center. I think Andres Pete, he slips right back in next to him. And you look at tackle, you got Zach Strief there. And then question mark here, I don't even know if it's in the comment section yet, but one of my main players I'm ready to see how much he can actually do at this point, or how much they let him do at this point, is Terron Armstead. I'm wondering to see how healthy is he. They got a lot invested in him. They feel like he's one of the best left tackles. To me, has nothing to do with ability. Has everything to do with his health. Because healthy, he is one of the best left tackles in the NFL. I don't think there's any question.
Yeah, and let's face it. I mean, they need Armstead. If they're going to make a run back to the playoffs, he's got to be healthy this year. They can't have him miss extended periods of time. And look, the division's getting more difficult in that area. We all see what Atlanta has done with their edge rushers. I think Carolina had a point of emphasis this offseason to improve their pass rush. And we know
they brought back Peppers.
Right. And then Tampa, of course, has this young phenom, Noah Spence, who everybody thinks could have a breakout year the way Beasley did. They need somebody to protect Breeze. And there's no one on the roster better than Armstead. And he also could use a full season for his contract status down the road.
Right, exactly. Let's go to Amity St. Loyal, Dat Chat commenter. Appreciate it as always. We've got 2 questions. They're lengthy, but from what I can scan through, they're absolutely viable. So let's go through them both. The middle of the defense looks to be the foundation. Defensive tackle and safety are the deepest and strongest position on a D. You could argue that after Cam Jordan, the next 4 best defensive linemen are 300-plus pound defensive tackles. You could also argue that safety on paper is stacked with quality talent. It's important to be able to find out who the best 11 are and find them early enough to create stability. These good offenses go hurry up and won't allow you to substitute in and out, and there's nothing worse than seeing defenders pointing fingers in confusion like in the Atlanta finale. Jeff, I was mentioning maybe a minute ago how you look at the defensive front, you at least know who you got outside of the other edge guy.
The left end, yeah.
You know you've got Cam Jordan. You know you've got your 4 defensive tackles, and with Nick Fairley, Sheldon Rankins, Tyler Davison, and David Onyemata. And then at safety, you've got good 4 guys there.
Mm-hmm.
Vaccaro, Bell, now Marcus Williams, and Raphael Bush. So I think to that point, you at least have some stability. I agree with that point.
Yeah, and I do think it's a little overrated to say you need this kind of early stability in the lineup, because Dennis Allen is a lot like Greg Williams in that he uses remember Greg Williams used to always say, we're going to use all 27 on Sunday, and he kind of did.
Yeah.
Everybody had a role, and Dennis Allen, I think, believes in that same philosophy. They play all kinds of different sub-packages, and they're multiple in their looks that they put out and their personnel packages. So they're going to be rotating guys in and out. I don't know of too many teams that play no huddle a full game. Matter of fact, Atlanta is one of the few teams that even employs it. I think New England does a little bit of it, but they also have quarterbacks that can pull it off. For the most part, I don't think that's the exception, not the.
There's not enough good quarterbacks in the league to be able to pull it off.
Right, and even the Saints. How many times do we have fans ask us, how come the Saints don't do it? Well, there's a lot of reasons why they don't do it, but the main reason is it'll wear your offense out, it wears your defense out because they're on the field too quickly. I mean, there's a advantage to ball control, and the Saints are very good at controlling the clock with their offense. They were one of the league leaders last year in time of possession. The longer you have the ball, the less chance the other team has of scoring. And against the Saints defense, that's always a good thing.
And to go back to the Atlanta finale, remember after the game how even the defensive players on the Saints side could hear Matt Ryan telling everyone exactly what the Saints defense was going to do on that play.
Yes.
That was a just poor game plan, and they knew everything the Saints were going to do. And let's be honest, the Saints, their defense was a shell of themselves.
They were overwhelmed in that game.
They were totally overwhelmed, personnel-wise overwhelmed, and scheme-wise, game plan-wise. I think the Saints were ready to mail it in, and Atlanta was ready to cash in. And, well, they almost did.
Yeah. I mean, Atlanta – sometimes I look back at that Super Bowl, and I think the best team lost. I mean, when I watch Atlanta,
I completely agree.
They were just dominating that game and let it slip away.
Absolutely.
They really let it slip away. I mean, if they played that game over again, they wouldn't play it the same way, and everything kind of fell in New England's favor. So I don't think Atlanta's going anywhere. I think they're going to be a clear team to beat. But we've seen it happen year to year, right? I mean, look at Carolina. They dropped off the face of the earth. It happens in this league. You get behind the 8 ball a little bit. You play a little bit tougher schedule. Things start, you maybe get some injuries, and you lose a little confidence. Atlanta was playing with such confidence last year, you could see it. But their offense is going to be scary again. I don't see any drop-off in that. I just still question some of their defense.
You see, though, every year or a bunch of years, it's hard enough for the Super Bowl champ to get back, but you see a drop-off from the team that loses the Super Bowl. That happens a lot. Mm-hmm. And it's something that Atlanta's going to have to overcome. I think that's a big deal for them, even psyche-wise. You could hear anybody say this, that, the other. Oh, we put it past us. No, you didn't. No chance. You get on the field week 1 and something starts to snowball, it's human nature to revert back to that. So I think they've improved. Look at defensively. They got Tack McKinley. They got Duke Riley. I thought those were 2 good additions in the draft. And yet they've got to, the rest of the squad have to try to overcome that. And they do. Here's another thing not many people probably even mentioned, but they will get one of their best defensive players back.
I was just getting ready to bring that up. I mean, people talk about Saints injuries. They lost Desmond Trufant for the whole season.
Right.
And Desmond Trufant is a Pro Bowl elite shutdown corner. Sean Payton loves Desmond Trufant. He talks about him all the time. They're going to have that guy back. He's like getting a top 10 pick back. So, yeah, there's no question. I think they're going to be just as good as they were last year. Now, whether they win as many games, I don't know. I mean, but their offense was so dynamic. I don't see how it isn't as good unless maybe they miss Kyle Shanahan more than we think.
That's a big
element,
loss.
right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Because he really clicked with Matt Ryan. And you'd think they would try, Sarkisian would try to mimic some of the things that worked for them last year and just let Matt Ryan run the offense the same way the Saints let Drew Brees kind of run things now.
Right. Let me go to the second part of this question. Jabari Greer was asked on the radio, what's the secret? A good pass rush or good coverage? He said having those guys on the second level at linebacker that are versatile enough to do it all and do it all good. The dangerous pass rush helps, plus can hold up in coverage. Saints are giving up too many simple short passes that turn into more than they should. He said Wagner and Wright are perfect examples of why Seattle is so good. I think most would agree that our best three linebackers of the 10 years were Vilma, Fajita, and Shanley. To think of all those guys we have now are more athletically gifted than Shanley, who handled the weak side of all positions, really has me demanding better play and coaching. If Deion Jones can become an immediate star at middle linebacker, which he didn't even play in college, I'm definitely demanding better coaching. Again, it's the old adage, Joe Vitt didn't know what he was doing. Let's see what something new with Mike Nolan is there. But what do you give of Jabari's credence that linebacker play can help everyone on the field? Again, you're not. We've had these discussions on here. Maybe you're not big into investing big money or high draft picks in a linebacker, but what do you make of having very good linebacker play help kind of carry a defense?
Well, there's no question about that. I think that's a valid point. I mean, I think it's easier said than done. That you can just get a linebacker that's a good athlete. I mean, Deion Jones not only is a tremendous athlete, he's extremely smart. I mean, he's a combination of strengths there. He's a second-round draft pick too. He was a high draft pick. So
I don't want to say where he went to high school. I'm just going to leave that out.
College. College
is fine. Look, he produced both of us, but just because he went to my arch rival as a Rummel Raider, Deion, poor Deion,
Debo.
Yep.
But I think that look at Tampa. I think the one thing that you could say about the Saints in the division, they probably had the worst linebacker core for a number of years now, right? I mean, look at Carolina with Kuechly and Thomas Davis. And
A.J. Klein was even a solid piece.
Right.
I mean, now
and Tampa has Quan Alexander and Levante David. I mean, we're talking like Pro Bowl level players here. And Atlanta upgraded significantly in 1 year. They were pretty weak there.
Absolutely.
And it quickly turned into something of a strength for them. Could that happen in New Orleans? I think so, but they've gone about it a different way with a lot of veteran guys for the most part in free agency as opposed to investing high draft picks. So we'll see. I mean, Anzalone, maybe he pans out. Maybe he becomes that kind of guy. I don't know. But I do think there's a valid point in that when you and I have watched Seattle in the past, we've been in all of those linebackers. I mean, Wagner
is terrific.
Yeah, he's incredible. You can just see how athletic he is. And so I think but those guys are rare. I mean, we're talking like Pro Bowl linebackers. If the Saints had one of those guys, they would play him every down. They just don't have that in this system. And I would be surprised if anybody emerges at that level.
To me, it's amazing now for Saints fans to come out and say, man, remember the days when they had Fajita and Shanley? You remember those days?
Right.
When at the time all people wanted to do was just rip, especially Shanley. They just wanted to rip him to shreds. He's terrible. Da, 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 da. And now they go back and it's like revisionist history. Remember when they were winning like the Super Bowl with Scott Shanley? And you remember when they kept all these good things? It's pretty amazing, kind of that group. You think about it, those three guys together were good for a good 3+ years, say, together, and it helped solidify, not just playing-wise, because it's not like, say, Fajita and Shanley were these athletic freaks, and Vilma probably lost a step because of the lingering knees, but they all certainly got it done together. I don't think anyone can deny that anymore.
No, and I think one common thread I've noticed in the linebacker group, and you're talking Anzalone, you could talk Te'o, Klein, all of them very sharp guys, very smart guys that are known for their, instinctive ability. Now, they might not be over-the-top athletes, but these are the kind of guys that Shanley and Vilma and, Fujita were. So maybe they've gone back to that. Maybe that's a Nolan trait that he likes in his linebackers, but that's a common thread throughout the offseason. And not only with the linebackers, but when I was doing more research on, of course, Marcus Williams, very sharp guy, team captain. This is the stuff that the Saints always talk about, and you see it at least in the early rounds of the draft. Later on, they were taking some flyers on guys, and in the undrafted ranks. But early on, they're taking guys that have very smart, high Wonderlic scores, very common thread in their personnel acquisitions.
Let's go to J&D 1974. Howdy, guys. Who do you – I just wanted to do a funny voice there, and I didn't even do a funny voice. Who do we have that can actually give us a return game? I had high hopes for Murphy, which is Marcus Murphy, when he was drafted, but he hasn't panned out with all the drops. The return game is an important part of the game itself in the battle for field position and a possible score. Jeff, they certainly addressed their return game both in free agency and in the draft. Ted Ginn can certainly be a returner. Alvin Kamara can certainly be a returner. It wouldn't stun me in the least if those two guys immediately, one was your kick returner, one was your punt returner. You probably put Kamara, your kick returner, and put Ginn as a punt returner. And both guys would absolutely embrace it, and it gives you a jolt.
Yeah, I think you're spot on. I think it saves them some roster spots, too. If I'm Marcus Murphy and even Tommy Lee Lewis, those guys are in jeopardy.
Big trouble.
Big trouble. When you sign a Ted Ginn Jr., he's going to make the roster, and they're probably going to take advantage of his return skills because that allows you to free up another roster spot for some of these defensive guys that they need. They've got such competition at some of these other positions that it wouldn't surprise me to see a completely different makeup this year in the 53. I don't think they're going to have 6 running backs this year.
No, I don't think so either. They have their top 3. And it'll be Lasco probably as your 4th guy because he could still do some different things. And just Travaris, could that even make the team?
I think it's up in there.
I think
I'll be surprised if he makes it.
Yeah, I would be too.
Because I think Peyton's in love with him. And I tell you what, I hate to give this out in the middle of May.
But that's the point.
In the middle of May.
Time, babe. Come on.
I would draft Alvin Kamara in my fantasy league. I would get him high because I think he's going to be a big-time producer. He's going to be another, Sproles type of guy.
Sproles, Reggie Bush type of guy, catching the ball.
Mm-hmm.
And I do think that you look at Kamara, and you're not looking at Fleener to make up the production that Cooks has lost. I think you might look at Kamara to get a bulk of the receptions. Now, he's not going to be the sharp route runner, but he's going to be more involved and used as a wide receiver to kind of counteract that loss.
Yeah, they'll just – remember when we were talking to Peyton before last season and in his office about his offense and how he talked about how – and this is nothing earth-shattering. We hear other coaches say it, but he tailors his scheme to what his personnel is. It's very simple. And he's got now all these backs. They don't have the dynamic depth at receiver that they've had in the past. Last year was all receivers. And this year, you're right. I think Kamara is going to get a lot of those same touches that they would go to the other – that maybe would go to Brandon Cooks. Remember, they kept trying to force-feed Cooks on those jet sweeps. He wasn't very good at that.
No.
It wasn't a strength of his.
No.
In screens, those little bubble screens to him, he wasn't very good at that either.
He's good at actually route running. He can run every route. You don't need to just put him in space. He's not some, shifty guy like Kamara, Reggie, Sproles. They're shifty. They don't have to necessarily be straight line fast. But yeah, I agree. I think you might have given away a secret, Jeff. Good job, dude. I hope you're not trying to win any drafts or leagues. You blew it.
I don't think there's anybody in my league listening to this podcast right now, so hopefully I'll be able to sneak him in the middle rounds.
What if we hold a league, me and you, and invite listeners?
Well,
y'all can all fight over Alvin Kamara.
I think he's going to have a big year. Of course, I thought Kobe Fleener was going to have a big year too, and I was wrong about that. So, all right, let me go to the mixer feed because
go for it.
We got a bunch of questions coming in all of a sudden out of nowhere.
Now that we're live, people can hear us.
a guy asked Warcraft84, why wouldn't we take a flyer on someone like Devin Taylor or Mario Williams? I didn't know Mario Williams had not been picked up. I thought he'd been picked up by somebody, but I guess he's a free agent.
Floating out there, and it's probably the same reason why they didn't want to last year. They probably just didn't feel like it was worth the investment. I mean, I'm sure the investment's not too big this time around, but I think maybe the tape probably says it all for him. He's regressed, and there's a reason why there was still an interest in Julius Peppers as opposed to Mario Williams. And, it was Carolina for Peppers, and they know him, of course, but he was still playing at a solid level in Green Bay. Mario Williams has fallen off the cliff. I mean, at this rate, to me, it's easier to invest in someone like Darryl Tapp, who they know, and they brought him back, and added Okafor, drafted 2 guys, and then you have maybe Kikaha. We got to see what happens with him. But to me, it's that he's fallen off the cliff. That doesn't stun me.
Yeah, it's usually the case when you hear these big name guys that have been productive for a number of years, and they're just sitting out there on the street. People have looked at their tape, and they're just not the same player. And look, the best way I can describe it to Saints fans is think about Saints players you've seen that happen to over the years. You know, big name guys. We saw kind of Pierre Thomas kind of start to tail off, and you see it in these veteran guys, Colston, where they're just their last year. They're not the same player that you saw all those years, and that's probably the case with Mario Williams, I would say. And it's what worries me, frankly, about Adrian Peterson is that no one else was really going after him. I mean, a couple teams looked at it, but nobody signed him. I know he had some contractual demands, but it just worries me a little bit when you get a guy like that who's at that position in his 30s. I don't know.
But they've got Mark Ingram. Everybody loves Mark Ingram, right?
I don't understand the hate on Mark Ingram. It's got to be Alabama, right?
It's amazing. It has to be.
I mean, it makes no sense.
It has to be. Imagine if he was LeBrandon Toefield, bringing back old LSU running back days. What if he was him?
Cecil the Diesel.
Or Kenny Hilliard. Then they'd be like, get Adrian Peterson out of here.
Right. They would love
Jeremy Hill.
And I will tell you this. I remember, I'm sure we were at camp together, when they brought in Ingram, he had a great camp. I thought he was going to be just incredible.
He looked quick, sleek.
Nobody could tackle him.
He looked great.
He ran over Roman Harp on the goal line. We were all writing about him. And then he got hurt. This was never the same player. He didn't look the same. Last year was the first time where he started to look like that guy again. I don't think he's ever going to be quite that explosive, but he's finally started to look like the guy that they drafted, I felt like. And look, he's coming off of 16. He played 16 games for the first time in a while. I don't know what's not to like it, but maybe the Saints feel like, hey, he hasn't done it. Last year was kind of an anomaly. We better get some insurance. But man, it's high-priced insurance.
Yeah, it is. You're basically paying the same guy twice. Ingram and Peterson basically make the same money. And if Peterson really goes bonkers, and to me, what was really curious. And you could scoff at Vegas, but they know what they're doing. The odds of Adrian Peterson through Bovada, one of the gambling sites that's
sports book, right?
Right, one of the sports books that kind of floating out on the internet. Their over-under on Adrian Peterson's yards for next year is 900.
Really?
Yes.
Man, that seems high to me.
Exactly. But what do they know?
Man, I might need to get down on that. I think I'm going to...
You're going to go put a $1 billion on the under.
A little honey on the under. I'll be shocked if he gets over 900 yards.
I'd be shocked, too. That seems very high.
The Saints have only had, how many running backs, 1,000-yard rushers? Isn't Ingram the only one since Deuce?
Oh, well, they've had 2 under Peyton. One was Deuce in 2006, and this past year, Ingram.
Wow. They probably have a limit on how much you can bet. That's what I'm guessing.
I don't know.
There's going to be a limit on that. They're not going to let you load up on that. That seems crazy.
What if he gets 400 yards in week 1 against Minnesota? They force feed him, and he just goes crazy.
I can't see that happening.
You don't think
Minnesota's got a good defense.
You don't think they're going to force feed Peterson week 1?
Sean might, just to prove everybody wrong.
I think
he
absolutely.
loves to do that.
Absolutely.
He loves to do that. I mean, how many – I'll never forget the beginning – I think it was last year, about this time last year, And it's important to remember things like this sometimes. I distinctly remember Mickey Loomis in an interview, and I don't know who it was with. I don't know if it was at camp or one of the post-draft interviews. He said, "This is the year we're finally going to see the real C.J. Spiller."
I knew you were going to bring that up.
And
we saw the real C.J. Spiller, all right. We saw it.
So it's just wise to remember it's the off season and the hype machine is rolling. Don't eat the cheese, right?
Ask Josh Hill about the off-season hype machine.
Yes.
After the Jimmy Graham trade. Oh, my gosh.
Yes.
Unbelievable.
We heard it from the head coach himself. And he's as guilty as anybody of it.
By
Maybe
design.
more guilty.
It's by design. It's some of the strategies. I'll just say Josh Hill. That strategy was to calm panic because they just traded away Jimmy Graham. And Ben Watson turned out to be far better that year.
Yes.
And
Shocked
then
me.
C.J. Spiller, they're touting him because at that point they didn't think he would even be on the roster, and I think they were trying to drum up interest somewhere. Someone please take this guy. Even Sean Payton has denied that to me, that was the route why they were pumping him up. And one of the things he told me was he heard the skepticism in my voice, and he says, "What, Larry, you don't believe me?" And I just went, no, no, I don't believe you.
Right.
And he said, "But no, I'm telling you, this is real." No, I don't buy it. They were trying to get him out of town, and they did after week 1 when they could finally afford it.
And the thing with Peyton is sometimes he just truly believes it. Like,
Sometimes
he truly believes it, and it's not that he's strategic. He's like any other head coach. Sometimes he gets caught up and loves players. Coaches all fall in love with their guys, and then when they make an investment too in a guy like a C.J. Spiller, and they got a lot of criticism for him, of course they're going to be defensive and build him up. And they did it with a lot of these broken down veterans that they've taken the last few years, and then they end up cutting them eventually,
or they
unceremoniously,
look like geniuses with Will Lutz.
Yes.
Now Peyton will walk around. "See, I told you so."
I'll tell you what. The one thing I would, and I'd love to talk to Peyton about this, and I will next time I see him, is I was definitely critical of them in the draft when they traded up to get Morstead, and that's turned out to be a really good move.
Oh, Peyton loves to bring that up and say how smart he was, but he also knew on the surface how bad it looked because Sean Payton saying he didn't even want to come out and talk to the press afterwards. He's like, "I sent Mickey out there." Because he knew they traded up for a 5th-round punter. And Morstead's, of course, been one of the most reliable punters we've seen since he's been in the league.
The question you would have, and you could still maintain criticism of the move, is they might have been able to get him without trading up.
Right.
I mean, that's the question. No one knows.
Right.
And they're always going to say, well, we had intel that someone was going to take him, so we went up. And how are you going to argue that? But, boy, you traded up to take a punter. I don't know.
Yeah. Let's go to Ace Star. What are your opinions with Justin Thomas signing? If you've seen his college video, he has similarities of Russell Wilson. What do you guys think Peyton will do with him if, and I mean big if, Thomas makes it to the 53-man roster? Well, Justin Thomas was a quarterback at Georgia Tech.
Mm-hmm.
And he came and tried out this past weekend as a DB. So that's the vision for him, whether it's corner or safety. It's not going to be quarterback. It's not going to be Russell Wilson. He's going to have to be a DB. And look, an athletic guy and someone they want to see if he can hack it at DB. Maybe find a little diamond in the rough.
We've seen that happen before in the league. It's pretty common, I think, with these really terrific athletes. I think the quarterback from Houston is trying.
Greg Ward
as a receiver, right?
In Philly. Yes.
Yeah, that's a little more common. We've seen that, of course, with Antoine Randall and Hines Ward. I mean, that's gone on for years. And lately, I've seen it a couple of times. I'm trying to remember the name of the Auburn quarterback from a year or two ago, but he tried to make it with Jacksonville, I think, or Miami as a corner.
I thought he got drafted.
Did he get drafted? Well, I think he ended up getting cut, if I remember correctly. I don't think he made it.
Talking about,
but it's a very similar thing. Now, Thomas was a terrific athlete. I remember covering him when they played. If you remember, they played the.
Can they play Tulane?
Yeah, they played the opening game at Tulane Stadium, and he was terrific in that game as an all-around athlete and quarterback, leader of the team. But let's face it, it's a long shot. I mean, it's difficult to make that transition at this level where your guys have been playing that same position for a number of years. But why not? Why not bring him in and maybe you put him on the practice squad and see how he pans out? It's worked in the past. The most famous one, and not at corner, a totally different position, was that Jeremy Parnell guy. That's
the guy I was exactly thinking.
Right?
You took it right out of my head, yes.
But that's a good example. I mean, they had him on the practice squad for, a year or two, and then he went to Dallas.
Well, here's what's even funnier, that Peyton talks about Parnell. He's at the Super Bowl practice in Miami, and Parcells is there. And Parcells pointed out Jeremy Parnell, and Peyton's just talking about him, and then
this is when Parcells was
in Miami.
In Miami, right.
Yeah, with the Dolphins. And I think they plucked him off the practice squad the next year. And Peyton's like, how did they know about this? And it was all Parcells' fault, their conversation at the Super Bowl practice back in Miami. And Parnell, hey, he parlayed that off. He signed a big contract, I think, in Jacksonville.
Jacksonville, right.
He's a starter. Started in Dallas, and
I think
he was
the
a
phrase,
basketball player.
Yeah, the phrase that Peyton used with us was "Don't let the fox in the hen house."
That's exactly yes.
Right.
Yes,
and there's a little bit of Trump in there with Peyton and bragging around about a player to his mentor, and his mentor ends up used it against him. That's a great story. But Parnell was a good example of a guy that was a total developmental prospect, and it worked out. And we're seeing that go on in Dallas right now with Rico Gathers, a basketball player, local product from Baylor, and bring him in, just put him on the squad, and let him redshirt a couple years, and maybe he develops into a decent tight end.
Let's go to DLP1. Seems like the 2015 draft class may be salvageable after all. Pete seems settled on the left side. Both Loomis and Peyton comments on Kikaha looking good and ahead of schedule. Sounds like great news. Now, Stephon Anthony getting positive feedback from Mike Nolan based on his evaluation. With all things considered, what's your take now knowing what has been said in recent weeks and any news on Damian Swann and P.J. Williams? Here's my take on what's been said recently. I'm not buying Stephon Anthony until I see it. I'm not buying Haley Kikaha until I see it. I'm not buying Damian Swann or P.J. Williams till I see it. So my take has not changed just because of what's happened with public comments. You're not going to dog out a player at this time of the year publicly when they're trying to scratch and claw on a roster.
Yeah, this is the cheese eating period. This is when everybody's great and every team's unbeaten and hope abounds. And you're right. We've been around the block too many times. Sometimes it can be valid, but I'm always leery of it. And until they get in real games, I would not buy into any of this hype. Maybe it turns out, but it's just too many times. It's for me. The guy, what you remember from these players in the past year or two is what you're going to get. You're not going to get some massive improvement. Now, the one thing I would say about P.J. Williams is, he had a concussion, and he was playing at a very high level, I thought. He was playing very well. That's a guy I could see.
He deserved and earned a starting spot.
Yeah,
there's
he was
no
good.
question.
He was really good. He had a talent.
Mm-hmm.
The concern with him is this, is he going to be able to avoid something similar?
Right.
And you hope he can, because that was a devastating injury. But I could buy into him more than, say, some of these other players.
Yeah, and you're curious to see what Kikaha can bring. And Damian Swann, people bring him up, and I have to kind of bring some people back down to earth. He might not have even made the roster last year out of training camp. Yeah. He was slipping so much to where Devontae Harris and Ken Crawley jumped him on the depth chart. So it's almost, you don't want to ever say anything's kind of fortunate, but if Swann doesn't get hurt, they don't IR him, and then he's gone.
Right.
So he's got to fight to make the roster. And it's not only, look, now you've got Lattimore, Delvin Breaux, P.J. Williams, Sterling Moore, who I don't see any reason why you wouldn't keep him after he had a solid year. And if he's the same guy, you certainly keep him. And then you still got Harris, and you still got Crawley, and they're all fighting, and they probably have some other younger guys floating around. Who knows if one of those guys emerges?
I'm really eager to get a first look at Lattimore. I'm hoping that he's going to be practicing. I assume he is. I just really want to watch him, and whether he's in shorts and T-shirts or whatever. I just want to see his athletic skills because they just have not been able to solve that position. Bro had a good year 2 years ago, but it's so critical in this league. And to be trying to run out guys like, and nothing against King Crawley and Devontae Harris and those guys because they competed extremely hard and Sterling Moore, but to have a true lockdown guy is going to be huge for that defense. And if he can be that guy, it's just going to make everything so much easier on that side of the ball. And maybe it will help their pass rush out a little bit. I'm dubious about that. I don't think it's quite that easy, but it certainly is not going to hurt to finally have a lockdown guy opposite Bro.
I think Lattimore walks in and he's your best corner immediately.
I do too.
And I wouldn't have said that before last year because I thought Delvin Bro would have been on his way, but we've got to see it with Delvin Bro. Definitely had a good first year. He was one of the better corners in 15. He was.
Yeah, he had a great year.
Yeah.
But it's hard to buy in when they just do it 1 year.
Absolutely.
1 year, he was really good that year, but it was just 1 year.
Yeah. Let's go to Saint for Life. Hi, guys. Do you think the defense can make a big step with the new additions? I thought they would be okay last year if they were healthy. And then Kikaha, Bro, Williams got hurt. I think our depth is better this year with the exception of defensive end. I do think they have successfully added depth. Linebacker, there's no doubt at safety. Potentially at corner if they can stay healthy. Defensive tackle, they're good. I do feel like they are probably deeper and have more options to either test out or feel better about if someone gets hurt than they have in the last couple of years, honestly.
Yeah, I agree. I think they're deeper in a number of positions. I'll never forget getting to camp a couple of years ago, and I always come in a week and relieve you,
right.
Week into camp, and seeing now I'm blanking. I was saying Bobby Richardson starting at defensive end 1 week into training camp. He's undrafted rookie free agent, and he's starting on the defensive line.
Started the whole year in 15, and now he's not on a team. He can't make a team.
Right, and that's when you realize, man, this team's in trouble if they're going to rely on these guys. Glenn Foster,
Kevin Williams.
I just got a flyer the other day. Glenn Foster Real Estate. He's a realtor in town.
That's what he's doing now.
Right.
Hey.
Good guy.
Yeah.
But when you're counting on guys like that level to try and dominate starting offensive linemen in this league or go against them and compete against them, you're in trouble.
And let's go to the second part of this question. With the exception of Lattimore and Kamara, what rookie or rookies do you think will make an impact this year? Jeff, I'm assuming you would say the Anzalone train.
And Kamara. I'm big on
that's what he's saying, Kamara too. I want to see what these defensive ends do, and you're not going to be able to get a good read on them until you get them in preseason games.
Right.
We're going to be able to see some things, individual drills, this, that, the other. But for Hendrickson and Muhammad, do I think they have the build to play defensive end? I think so. What do they bring on, I don't know, under the lights on a Saturday in the preseason or third Friday, whatever? Right. I think we need to see it there to see how much impact they can bring. Because right now, Okafor is your defensive end. Yeah. He's your starter, and I don't think there's any question about that right now.
Yeah, I think Tap works in there just because they know what they got with Tap.
True. That would be, you could put Tap in, say, in run situations,
right,
and Okafor is your pass rusher. I think, yeah.
But, I would be hesitant to really hype either of those guys just because, man, they're lasted to the third round of what was Muhammad.
Muhammad was a sixth rounder, and he look, talent wise, he has more talent than me in the 6th round pick, but he did some bonehead things in Miami and got tossed, and it wasn't anything majorly criminal, but those are red flags.
No, there's no doubt. But look, if he had off the charts ability, somebody would have taken him even higher in the 6th round.
Sure.
Look at Randy Gregory goes in the 1st round. He had all kinds of red flags.
Well, he did it in the 2nd round.
Second round,
yes.
But he went high.
Joe Mixon.
Yeah, they're going to take it. So I'm very hesitant to hype either one of those guys because pass rusher is such a critical need in the NFL. Other than quarterback, left tackle, and cornerback, edge rusher is one of the 4 critical positions. And everybody's looking for those guys. So for them to drop down that far, I'm hesitant to crown them, as Denny Green used to say, because I feel like if they were really, really talented, they would have gone much higher, because there's such a need for that in this league. It's just my 2 cents. Okay, a guy asked me on Mixler real quick about Bruce Thompson, the feature subject of our Herbie Teope's massive takeout on him, a local product who was at a small school, right? I think, where was he at? Langston University. 5'11", 195-pound receiver, who's on the undrafted ranks. They brought him in.
Right.
I would say this about.
It was just a tryout.
Oh, was he just a tryout? Well,
actually, yeah.
Here's the thing I would say that I think you would agree with me on. Somebody's going to make the team at receiver. There's an opening there. We've talked about Trayvon Durrell. There's not a lot of depth once you get past the top 3 guys. If you think Brandon Coleman is the 4th, which we know the Saints are still pretty high on him, then you start getting into guys like Tommy Lee Lewis and just a bunch of guys that really have no experience. So there's an opening there, and you could even make the case that there's an opening if Coleman doesn't produce. Once you get past the top 3, I think a receiver is going to make this team that maybe we are not expecting right now.
A la Willie Snead a couple of years ago.
Yep, happens, right?
Same way. Oh, yeah, Willie Snead came out of maybe literally being the last person on the depth chart and emerged. And that's what this time's going to be about. But, yeah, Brandon Coleman, they're going to be looking for a young receiver. Brandon Coleman, he's only on a 1-year deal. Ted Ginn essentially is on a 1-year deal. They need to find some young depth there and develop them. I think Durrell's a good point. We got to see how he can handle it speed-wise, since the hamstring's a big deal with him. But no, they did not. They didn't sign Thompson after minicamp, so basically he's just going to be trying to fight his way under a roster. So he's not with the Saints right now. But cool story. You hope for the best for him. He's had a crazy life, and certainly it's a good story. So obviously someone you could easily root for. Try to make at least get into a camp and see what happens.
Incredible story for sure. And this is the kind of guy that he's got the Mannings in his court. So they've got connections all over the league, and certainly people are going to know, and they've now got tape on him. It's just a hard road sometimes, but guys have to find their fit. Just like Willie Snead didn't make it in Cleveland and Carolina, and he finds a spot with the Saints, and now he's a starting player.
He's going to get paid maybe soon.
Yeah, it happens. Absolutely. I mean, I remember having this conversation with Andre Hawkins at the Super Bowl this year. He played for the Bengals for a while, and he was telling me he played in the CFL. He was bouncing around, and this was for years he was doing it, trying to get his spot, and he finally caught on with the Bengals and had a good career for a number of years. And now he just got his law degree. I just read a story on him. There's a terrific story about him now kind of pursuing his second career. But he talked at length about that, how a lot of it is just sheer luck. You get on the right team and a coach believes in you. Maybe an injury happens, and he said it's not often about talent. A lot of these guys can all play. So who knows?
Yep, we'll see. I'm sure we'll keep. Well, Herbie, I'm sure we'll keep track. It's a great story. But that's going to wrap up this week's edition of our Dat Chat podcast. If you missed any of it, you can check it out later on NOLA.com. You can also check it out on our SoundCloud page and our NOLA.com iTunes. You could subscribe, and it'll just pop up in your podcast realm, I would assume.
Yes.
So good deal. So for Jeff Duncan, I'm Larry Holder. Thanks for joining us live. Thank goodness we figured out our problems. And we probably have other problems besides that. But don't forget, next week. We haven't
figured those out.
No, we'll never figure those out. But next week, OTA start. So we will kind of have a primer of that because they start next Tuesday. I'm not sure which days are open for the media, but we'll have all kinds of coverage for the next several weeks at OTAs and minicamps at NOLA.com and in our print editions of the Times-Picayune. So for Jeff, I'm Larry. Once again, thanks for joining us.